Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Secret Wars. I know it's been a little while. I was feeling a bit under the weather and kind of burnt out last week, so I just kind of disappeared for a little while. Apologize about that. It's just every once in a while, I just kind of get to a point where I'm just like, because I want to say that for about 2 years, we've been doing this virtually nonstop. And sometimes I forget that because I love what I do so much that sometimes I forget that I'm just going, just running all the time. And like every once in a while, even I just need to stop and take a break. So what I may end up doing here in the next little while, maybe once we finish this, I may end up taking a break for like a week or two, but I'll let you guys know ahead of time, right? I won't just disappear on you guys. But what we're doing here is we're picking back up with Secret Wars, right? This is part 3, I think it is. And the cool thing about this is that this opens up with Dr. Stephen Strange and Dr. Doom. Now, what you end up having here is Stephen Strange basically going over what's happening across the entire world of Battleworld for Victor Von Doom. Now, here's one thing that I do want to specify to you guys, because a lot of you guys have asked about this. Are we going to cover any of the tie-ins for Secret Wars? They're not really tie-ins. For those of you guys who are new to comic books, the way tie-ins usually work is you'll have like an event, right? So let's take, for example, Civil War. That's probably one of the most popular crossover events that Marvel's done in recent memory. We'll take the events of Civil War. You have the main Civil War story, which was 7 issues long. But we know the main Civil War story focused on Captain America versus Iron Man. The tie-ins were things like the Heroes for Hire tie-ins, where Iron Man had gone to like Misty Knight and to Shang-Chi and a few other people like Colleen Wing and so on, and basically said, use your detective skills to find Captain America, because Captain America's gone underground and I can't find him. And that's what their story focused on. And then there were things like the X-Men tie-ins, right, where Iron Man went to the X-Men and tried to recruit them to his side, and they said, no, we don't want to have anything to do with that. But usually tie-ins directly involve the events that are going on in the main story. With Secret Wars, it's not really that way. Secret Wars, the various tie-ins that we saw were just basically stories involving that one particular thing. If you read Civil War and you saw a Black Panther tie-in, which there was, although it was the wedding of Black Panther and Storm, but let's say you had a Black Panther tie-in and it was focusing on what T'Challa was doing during the events of Civil War, but had nothing to do with the Civil War event itself. That's basically every single story that goes on here aside from the main Civil War event. Some of them are really cool, like Old Man Logan, different things like that. Most of them are not. So I'll leave it to you guys if there are any in particular that you're interested in seeing, but I just want to kind of nip that in the bud real quick. But Stephen Strange is basically running over everything that's happening within the realm of Battleworld, right? So the Green North, as it's called, more or less Planet Hulk, he's kind of like, they're doing what they always do, which is kind of raging and so on and so forth, but there's not really a whole lot happening here. And the reality is that Dr. Doom is just kind of like, why do you always do this, Stephen? Like, why do you always come in here every morning, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and read me what's going on over the course of Battleworld, which is never really anything that I need to worry about? Like, why? Like, why do you do this? And the response to Stephen Strange is interesting here because it gives us some insight into what happened immediately following the destruction of all the Beyonders and all that power being readily available out there, right? We know that Dr. Doom has taken that power, that Dr. Doom has the power of the Beyonders, hence the reason why he looks so amazing. But the other thing here that's kind of given to us is that in that immediate moment, that initially Stephen Strange was offered the power of the Beyonders, right? That Stephen Strange could have taken the power of the Beyonders, but he chose not to. He didn't want that absolute power, but it does bother him. He does look back on that and say, like, I could have been you. So it seems to be some base level of jealousy, not in the extreme, but kind of like, I could have been this guy. But the other part of this is that for Stephen Strange, because he didn't really want that much power, he kind of looks around at what's left, right? Everything that's there. That Battleworld is composed of what few universes they could save, as well as whatever they could save from like the main Marvel universe and just kind of hodgepodge it all together. But he looks around and says, this is all that's left. There's nothing left in the multiverse but this. There's no cosmic entities. There's no other realities. There's no nothing. We're it. It's us and like the one above all up there somewhere. And that's all there is. And so he understands the value of this. He understands the importance of what little they have left. And he basically does what he does because for him, it's honoring that, right? It's honoring all those individuals who died in the collapse of the multiverse, whether they wanted to or not, the destruction of all things, and basically saying like, because this is what little we have left, it's that important. And so I play my part because of the fact that I like to acknowledge this is all we really have left. The other part of this is that towards the end of their meeting, towards the end of their discussion, that you end up having, Stephen Strange getting an alert basically that tells him, of course, that Thanos and all of them have escaped the raft, right? Now, if you guys remember in the last video that we did, Valeria Richards, or at least Valeria Von Doom, as she's known now, the daughter of Victor Von Doom and Susan Storm, had basically shown up to Doctor Strange and said, hey, look, we found this device, this great big huge ship out there somewhere, and Stephen Strange sent the Thor Corps in order to quarantine it, right? All these different Thors, the police force of Battleworld, he sent them over there and basically said, quarantine this, make sure nobody gets in, nobody gets out. Of course, Thanos, the the Black Order, so like Proxima Midnight, Corvus Glaive, Namor the Submariner, all those guys, basically managed to escape, killed one of the Thors, but by the time everybody else got back there and Stephen Strange is arriving here, Thanos and all those guys are gone, right? And so Stephen Strange uses not really the Eye of Agamotto, the all-seeing eye, instead he uses the replacement that was given to him by Dr. Doom, by God King Doom, and basically kind of starts analyzing things. Now, this is the big difference here, is that using this eye, he can basically understand where characters are supposed to be in time and space, right? Are they of this particular universe? Are they of this particular time? And what he realizes is that Thanos and the guys inside this ship are not from this time period. Like, they're not from this Battleworld universe. They're from elsewhere. Now, Stephen Strange immediately starts putting pieces together. But when he asks the question, like, does anybody know where they went to? Did any of you guys see where they went? The response is, we don't know. The newest recruit, Thor, had taken off to go get help while everybody was gone and no one was there to watch them. Thanos and them, kind of scampered off. And so the idea is they were strong enough to kill one of the most powerful versions of Thor that was out there, right? This older version of Thor, which means they must be strong and they must be fast. And so they could be 500 leagues from here, right? They could be 100 leagues, 400 leagues, who really knows? And so Stephen Strange says, fine, call it 500 leagues, fan out, find them, and then bring at least one of them back to me alive, right? Don't kill them all. And that's kind of the important thing here. He says, I get that you guys are pissed. I get that one of your member was killed by these guys, and I know you guys want blood, and that's fine. But before you guys get blood, I need information. He's like, go find them, bring them back, and then we'll settle up, once it's all said and done. Now, once those various Thors take off, the newest recruit Thor still stays behind, right? Because for him, it's still his first day. It's this guy's first day on the job, right? And like, everything's just kind of popping off. But Stephen Strange at that point then calls out to the ship and basically says, I know you're in there, get out here, right? Like, we're alone, you can stop hiding, it's time for you to come out. And the person he's talking to inside the ship is Miles Morales, right? Like, Miles Morales, keep in mind, when we were covering the Incursions, he was from the Ultimate Universe, right? He stowed away on that raft that left the Ultimate Universe. So like, he's basically been here the entire time. Now, the cool thing about this is that as soon as he arrives, he starts sputtering to Stephen Strange, right? He's like, look, I have no idea what happened, man. Like, the last thing I know, I was sneaking onto this ship, and Stephen Strange is trying to ask questions, right? Like, you've been on board this vessel this entire time. Who are the other people who were with you? And Miles is like, I don't know, man. Like, the last thing I remember, there was a world in the sky and like all hell was breaking loose and like there was a big invasion and all that kind of stuff. And Stephen Strange is like, wait a minute, a world? Are you saying that you remember everything before Battleworld? And that's not how it's supposed to be. That's not how any of this is supposed to be. Now, the cool thing about this is that from here, we pick back up with Dr. Doom. One of the best things about Dr. Doom's character, and I feel like nobody can write him better than Jonathan Hickman, but one of the best things about Dr. Doom's character is that if you look at him before the events of Civil War, he was always trying to acquire absolute power for one of two reasons. The first reason was to free his mother's soul from Mephisto, because of the fact that she had sold her soul for some measure of power, and then once she had been killed, he had her soul for all eternity. Ultimately in the book, what is it? It was the Doctor Strange and Dr. Doom book, and I don't remember what it was called. They ended up freeing the soul of Victor Von Doom's mom. She went to heaven, and that was basically the end of that. The other reason why Dr. Doom acquires absolute power is because his hunger for power is insatiable, right? He's like Galactus, except on a much smaller scale, and always trying to attain absolute power. That's always been the crux of his character, and there was never really a definitive answer on what he would do if he gained that much. We got an answer a couple times during the original Secret Wars event, but it wasn't as though he had like lost his mind and tried to kill everybody. Instead, he just saw himself as a ruler of all things. Right? He was just kind of like, now I've attained this absolute power. What he's done here, and this is what's kind of cool here, what he's done here is he actually looks at himself from a very interesting introspective direction, but also he's struggling with kind of an existential crisis. And the reason why is because as he's talking to Susan Storm starts saying, hey, like, I went down to the town square, I basically made myself invisible, but I went down to the town square, I was walking around, and people were singing about the song of the man in the sun. And when the question is like, well, like, what are you talking about? We end up learning that at some point in the early days of Battleworld's formation, that Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, had risen up against Victor Von Doom. And when that happened, Victor Von Doom had basically subjugated Johnny Storm, and he was going to kill him, but he left his fate to Susan Storm. And Susan Storm chose that Johnny Storm should become the sun. And the result is that once he was basically killed, his body was put into the sky, that basically, at least I believe he was killed, but his body was put into the sky and it orbits Battleworld. And he's literally the sun. And it's one of these things because Susan Storm says, I think you're failing to understand the bigger picture here. And when Victor Von Doom asks, what are you talking about? Her response is, people are giving praise to the sun, and it's no small thing to be worshipped. And what she basically says is, the sun is a thing that's up there that people can see, that people can communicate with. They give praise to it because it's a tangible thing that's in there day after day, week after week, month after month. But you are shut up here in your citadel. You never really show people who you are or what you're about. They have a better understanding of what the sun is than they do you. And what you need to do, Victor, is you need to go down into the kingdom and let your people see you as you truly are. And the response of Victor is no. But it's not done out of arrogance. arrogance. If anything, it's actually done out of fear. That's really kind of the biggest thing that's hit here. The funny thing about this is that Victor Von Doom says how many gods receive praise when they were seen. Gods receive the most amount of praise when they're not seen, because people cannot tangibly see the things that the gods do. Basically, some things happen and then they chalk it up to God. And the best you ever really get is somebody somewhere witnessing an event that takes place and then writing it down somewhere, and then it just gets passed on, right? The nature of the Bible. Whether or not you choose to believe it is up to you. And there's some people who look at that and say, okay, well, there was Jesus, but Jesus was probably a schizophrenic, right? He heard voices, believed he was the Son of God. There are other people who look at that and say, no, he legitimately was the Son of God, and he really did the things the Bible said he did, and then came back to life after 3 days, right? Came back to life on Easter, I think is when it is. But, nonetheless, in the modern day, all these different kind of events that are written about in the Bible, if they cannot be scientifically explained, are just chalked up to faith. And the whole idea of Victor Von Doom is, maybe I should have just been a prime mover, right? Created all of this and then left. And then people would have truly praised me as a god. Because he's here and because he's tangible, despite all the power that he possesses, he still thinks like a mortal, which means he's afraid of being killed. He's afraid of all this coming crashing down. But there's a little more to it, right? It's not just that fear. There's actually a lot more that goes into it, which we'll cover a little bit later. But what we end up doing here is we switch to the hidden isle of Agamotto. And what this basically appears to be is an island that not even Victor Von Doom can see, right? It's a section of Battleworld that only Stephen Strange knows about and only Stephen Strange can access, along with whoever it is that he chooses to bring here. And when he ends up bringing Miles and Thor here, we end up learning that he found the other vessel at some point in time, but he never really gave any thought to it. The reason why this matters and the reason why this is important is because, remember, Stephen Strange was not on Earth when the vessel was created, right? He was not on Earth when Reed Richards and the Illuminati and the rest of those guys were basically creating this life raft as a means to escape the collapse of the incursions. Remember, he was out in space with the Black Priests, and then eventually with Dr. Doom and facing off against the Beyonders. He had no idea any of this happened. And so for a vessel to just kind of arbitrarily wash up on the shores of Battleworld, for him was just okay, this is just part of whatever world happened to exist out there. And he never really gave it any thought. He's we put this place together with a hodgepodge of different worlds, and maybe this was just part of one of those worlds, maybe that's just all it was. And that was it. With the more recent ship that's identical to this one, having been opened up and then people coming out of it, then suddenly he's okay, there's more going on here than I initially thought. And that's when he basically ends up having this Battleworld version of Thor open the raft. And when that happens, you get Jane Foster Thor, you get Carol Danvers, Peter Parker Spider-Man, and you get Star-Lord Peter Quill, survivors here. And they initially don't know this is really Stephen Strange, right? They're we don't really know if it's you. But of course, he kind of challenges them a little bit. And then he's met by the arrival of Cyclops, who's in the full possession of the Phoenix Force. Keep in mind, one of the things to remember is that yes, there was a Phoenix Egg, and yes, during the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, you did have the Phoenix 5, but those 5 pieces of the Phoenix Force had all coalesced down into the Phoenix Egg. And so Cyclops is in possession of the full totality of the Phoenix's powers. He is an omniversal force of power. That's what he is now. This gave us a massive hint as to what was going to happen. The reason being that if the Phoenix Force really is the sum total of all life that has ever, currently does, and will ever exist, then it means that Cyclops is the walking embodiment of everything that ever existed across the entirety of the multiverse before the events of Battleworld and everything that will come after, which basically solidified that we were going to get, everything coming after that. Now, it also kind of made sense from a publishing initiative. It wasn't as though Marvel was okay, guys, we finished Battleworld, time to close the doors. Everybody, you're fired. It's been real, guys. Peace. That wasn't going to happen, right? But it's important to understand Cyclops has a vast amount of power right now. But the fact remains that with Black Panther, of course, showing up, Black Panther basically solidifies, yes, we're from the main Marvel universe when he says Memento Mori, and Stephen Strange responds Illuminatus. So basically it's the calling card. But then he basically starts telling them what seems to be going on here, right? Everything that's kind of happening here. That in reality, for the people, for these guys inside this ship, it's been an hour. That for this hour, Reed Richards has basically been grieving over the loss of Susan and the loss of Johnny and all those guys who basically just ended up disintegrating, basically perishing, or at least seem to have perished in the collapse of the multiverse. But what he says here is that you guys have been gone for a very long time. It's been an hour for you. 8 years have passed here on this battle. The reason why this works, and at least the reason why this seems to work, although it does seem kind of throwaway, and we're kind of led to our own imagination here, is that when it comes to what had happened out there, that they've basically just been in stasis. That we can largely assume that with the collapse of the multiverse, also came the death of time and space, right? That time time doesn't pass, and there was no real space out there, right? There was just this giant empty white void. And grabbing what was left and throwing it down there, then it was basically it. Now, on Battleworld, time seemed to pass. But for them, just kind of being out there, they were left in stasis. And the idea is that when Stephen Strange keeps chiming in and basically saying that, like, God is the person who saved us, God's the person that created all of this, all that kind of good stuff, then suddenly you have the question asked by Reed, who is God? How is it possible that, like, nobody here knows, right? Because that's the thing that Stephen Strange says. Nobody on Battleworld knows how things used to be. Despite coming from universes that used to exist, none of them know how things were 8 years before all of this. And this is probably one of the biggest things, because when Peter asked the question, how is that possible? The response to Stephen is, well, how much of 8 years ago do you recall? You might recall a moment from 8 years ago, but you don't recall the world as you saw it when you were walking around downtown, you know, and just like getting ready to go into a store. You don't recall every facet of 8 years ago. And it's very easy to manipulate that. It's very easy to say, well, I mean, you remember this moment from 8 years ago, but you don't remember everything else from 8 years ago. And here's everything else that was going on 8 years ago. That combined with the fact that education, which is to say like what people are taught in Battleworld, is tightly controlled by Dr. Doom, basically means that people are only taught what they're allowed to be taught. And so over the last 8 years or so, the thought process and the memories of all the people on Battleworld have basically been kind of converged and moved and coalesced. They've all essentially been convinced that Battleworld has always been this way, and nothing was ever anything before this. And so again, when the question's asked by Reed, like, who is it, right? Who is this God that saved all of us? The response to Stephen is, it's Doom. That Victor Von Doom saved us all. And they're all in just like total shock, like what in the hell? And that's when T'Challa starts to pick up on things, and he says, how long ago did you find our raft? And Stephen says, like, I found it 3 years ago, and I knew that there was something inside of great consequence, but I had to weigh that against other things. Reed gets pissed. He's like, wait a minute, so you're telling me that Victor Von Doom, a guy who spent his entire life trying to acquire absolute power so he can effectively subjugate all of creation, has achieved that goal, and you had to weigh that against other considerations? Like, what could have possibly been the other consideration that you had to weigh this against? And the response of Stephen is, it's easy to explain. He's very good at playing God. At that point, we switch back over to Thanos, right? We jump directly to Thanos after having killed some food and basically made a meal, and everybody's finished feasting. And one of the things that Maximus the Mad picks up on is the sun orbits the earth and not the other way around, right? Whatever this land happens to be, the sun orbits it. And it's just these small little things that seem strange, these small little things that seem so weird, which obviously they've picked up on the fact that this is not the earth they came from, that wherever it is that they're at, it's starkly different from where they used to be. And so in that time, you end up having, you know, the Ultimate Universe version of Reed Richards who says, we should not have killed that older Thor, right? We should not have killed that guy. We should have asked him things. We should have taken him prisoner and asked him things. He could have given us answers about what this place is, about how all this stuff works. And everybody's really kind of like, yeah, man, like we really should, right? Like they're all looking down to the fire the whole time. Thanos is looking up, right? He's just kind of looking up into the stars and so on and so forth. And he's like, there's no need for mercy, right? There's no need to regret what was lost. And the question of Black Swan is like, really? Because like, I think that if we had kind of asked him what was going on here, that he could have given us answers to our questions, even if only under like pain of death. And the response of Thanos is no, the answers will find us. I absolutely know that it will. And when he's asked, how do you know? Thanos says, because I'm looking up. The entirety of the Thor core, all these different versions of Thor are all descending down upon Thanos. They are all coming to find them. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.